Texas Longhorns pick up a commitment during the basketball game this afternoon. Knutson, the football player, quarterback out of Smithson Valley, led Smithson Valley to the state championship this past year for Coach Larry Hill, has committed to the University of Texas. He's a 2027 prospect, so he's a high school junior, going to be a senior this coming year, but goes about 6'3", 6'4", 205, 210 pounds. He has committed to the University of Texas. Jeff, you've seen him play in person. Your thoughts on Knutson?
I like him. He's one of those guys that kind of, I wouldn't say came on the radar late, but when you're a first-year starter as a junior, you're going to be behind the eight ball a little bit. Again, Smithson Valley won a state championship in 2024. He led them to the back-to-back title in 2025 as we watch his touchdown for the state championship game. They played against a really good Frisco Lone Star team that's really known for putting out really good defenses. Went 12 for 21 for $160 and a touchdown in the state championship game. And this is a guy, Bobby, that even going back to the fall, I think initially when Sark and A.J. Milwee and the staff watched him, they liked him. They kind of kept a beat on what he was doing. And as you get into, the quarterback dominoes falling in 2027, at some point you got to make a decision and go with it. And they like Knutson first and foremost. I think that's really key to point out that they do like his talent. I don't think this is just a place filler. But anytime you come off a cycle, and Bobby, you've been doing this long enough to know this, especially now in the transfer portal NIL era, when you come off a cycle and you recruit a guy that's as well known and as highly regarded as Diabell is, it's going to make it that much harder for you to get a big-time quarterback in the following cycle. So I do like the fact that Texas didn't have to go that far away from campus to get their guy in 2027, and you've got a guy that's still got some upside left. He's not tapped out, I don't think.
So, same high school program that produced Trey Moore for the Longhorns as well, has been very successful down there in Central Texas for a number of years. One of the things that Sark has been and A.J. Milwee have been doing with all of their quarterbacks of late are guys that can move around well in the pocket. He's particularly athletic, Jeff, for the quarterback position. What are your thoughts on him and his athleticism as a whole?
Yeah, the athleticism plays, and I think we are seeing Sark and A.J. Milwee go in that direction. And I think, we see it with Arch now. Do you have a guy that's just got the unique ability like Arch has, where you've got a legitimate NFL skill set throwing the ball, but you can still have a run game designed around you? You'd love to have that. But I think at the end of the day, you look at Arch's ability to scramble, Bobby, I think that's really what they're looking for. Hey, it's Rod Babers has said it, and I agree with Rod tenfold. The scramble is now kind of the most effective play of football because you can have the right front coverage, personnel, everything dialed up exactly right to stop it. But if that guy breaks contain or can extend the play, you can be wrong. And we've seen that with guys, a lot of quarterbacks. You go back to 2024, whether it was Cade Klubnik or Sam Levitt, they played guys that could do that hurt them a little bit. And I think we saw Sark do that a little bit more with Arch, and you're starting to see the way Texas is changing. KJ Lacey's a little bit like that. Diabell's like that. I think Knutson's like that. You're seeing them get away. I think Trey Owens, Bobby, might be the last guy they recruit for a while that's kind of your big prototypical pocket passer that's got some mobility. But, man, if you got a guy that's got some athleticism, you might as well use it. I don't think Sark's ever going to be, the old Urban Meyer pro spread offense where you're running quarterback power 10 to 15 times a game. But I do think he's getting his head wrapped around that, hey, if you've got guys that are athletic at that position, you're really just selling yourself short if you don't tap into that.
Yeah, at the very least, it gives you the opportunity. It's something that gets Texas an opportunity. And I think that Sark is seeing that in the SEC. You got to have some mobility at quarterback, or else you're going to be a sitting duck back there. That's certainly the case. Led his team to the state championship this year, Jeff. A couple of outstanding games along the way. But a nice pickup. He becomes the sixth commitment in the class of 2027 for the Longhorns. They're on a little bit of a roll right now. Cameron Hall, the big defensive end out of Mansfield Summit, committed last week. Cade Hogg, the linebacker, committed earlier this week as well out of Kingwood. Texas now at 6 commitments on the whole. I mentioned Cameron Hall and Cade Hogg. They also have Easton Royal, the wide receiver, out of Brother Martin in New Orleans. JT Garachi, the tight end out of New Jersey. Don Bosco Prep in Ramsey, New Jersey. and Carnell James, Greedy James, the defensive back, out of the Manville area down in just outside of Houston. This is interesting because one thing we're seeing Sark do is fill up a little earlier than he has in years past. Now, he's not going over the top. He doesn't have 15 commitments right now, but they just had their first junior day 2 weeks ago. Right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Is this a different style of recruiting that we're seeing from Steve Sarkisian?
I've thought about that, and I think before we get into whether there's wholesale changes, I think we need to give maybe this cycle some time to play out, because this is the first cycle where, from the jump, you're going to 105 scholarships. And I think when you've got guys, if you've got guys that you feel like are maybe borderline guys, but you need to fill out your roster, you might not wait. Typically, if it's a guy who's borderline, you might wait. Hey, let's go watch him during the spring evaluation period, maybe get him back for a camp this summer, and then determine if he's on the board or not. I think now you've got a little bit more margin for error because you do have 105 scholarships. But I think the longer you wait, Bobby, the more you're going to let people get their foot in the door, and you may not be able to go back on some of those kids that you like. And a lot of the times teams are going to make that decision for you. So I want to see how this cycle plays out to see if, hey, look, there's blue chips at the top. Like a kid like Easton Royal, you take him if he wants to commit. Kids of that caliber, whenever they want to commit, you take the commitment. But I think for everybody else, I'm taking more of kind of a wait and see approach. And if we see Texas fill up on some guys that you say, well, could they have gotten that guy later? Maybe, but what if there's multiple other SEC or ACC or Big 10, Big 12 schools waiting to get that kid because they've got the same thing in mind? Hey, let's just get him here, develop him, kind of see what happens. If he ends up hitting, great. Didn't really cost us too much on the front end from a rev share standpoint. And if he doesn't, you're not out. I'm not saying that's Ty Knutson, by the way, but I think for the most part, I want to see how this cycle plays out before we kind of get a beat on what's going to change in the big picture.
Real quick, people are asking for his stats, Jeff. One of the things that Larry Hill does not do for Smithson Valley is provide stats to folks for their season. He is old school when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So long story short, we do not have official stats. We had the championship game stats that Jeff gave you earlier. Look, Jeff, I look at this and I see 6 guys already committed. I also think it's a little bit of an indicator of how Texas is being perceived right now. Sark, when he first came in, even though Texas was Texas, and I want to be clear about that, it's a little bit different recruiting situation for him now than it was just 3 or 4 years ago. He stacked 2 back-to-back college football playoffs, and then last year he has a 10-win season. He's got Arch Manning, who's the talk of college football at some level the whole year long. I think recruiting, and I don't want to say it's getting easier for him, but it's becoming more like it should be at the University of Texas. The scholarship a little bit more in demand than it was just 3 or 4 years ago.
And I think the key is you got to find a happy medium, right? We saw post-national championship, Bobby, really until that 2010 season. A scholarship offer to Texas pretty much meant you had a high probability you were going to get the kid. As it turns out, there were some of those, decisions that were made early, and we could be here all day talking about what went right and what didn't post-national championship from a recruiting standpoint. But no, I agree with you. I think the Texas offer now, now that you've proving yourself in the SEC, let's face it, it's a different animal. You've been to 2. These kids have watched you go to 2 CFP semifinals. I mean, our Arch Manning is all over the place. So in terms of your brand, your recent success, yeah, it's about where you would expect Texas to be. I think the kids are responding. I'll say this too, Bobby. I want to, I'll stump for kids from the state of Texas, especially kids from my neck of the woods anytime I can. When you look at how the quarterback dominoes fell for Texas, Kavian Bryant was the guy that they liked early.
He's out of Palestine Westwood, committed to Texas Tech.
2-sport kid, committed to Tech, like right around Thanksgiving. And could they have scoured the country and found a guy and got him on campus and got in the fight, yeah. But if you feel like a guy from the state of Texas is about as good as anybody else you'd find in the country, I'm always for, hey, go ahead and take the kid from the state of Texas. I just think at the end of the day, when you get those kids in your program, wearing that uniform, putting that logo on their helmet, that name across the front of their chest, in this era where loyalty is, it's becoming extinct before our eyes. I think to the kids from the state of Texas, that still means something at the end of the day.
I agree with that to a level, but you got to have the talent, and I think that's what Ty Knutson has. Here's a look at the quarterbacks already on campus. The thing that this does is it basically MJ Morris will be gone next year. Arch, because he's done with his eligibility for college football. Arch Manning, we don't know if he'll be done next year. We think he will be, but adding Ty Knutson gives Texas 3 quarterbacks for 2027. KJ Lacey, Dia Bell. Texas likes to carry 4. They are not going to go after, in my opinion, Jeff, another high school quarterback. That would be really rare. They're going to go just with one in Ty Knutson. So that means they might be looking for one in the transfer portal, similar to MJ Morris, who they got out of Coastal Carolina, who's a career backup. Unless they don't think KJ Lacey or Dia Bell is ready for prime time. That's
the big question the rest of the way, Bobby. Now that you got Ty Knutson, you got your high school take, you're probably going to take a guy out of the portal. Are you taking a guy that's more MJ Morris, Matthew Caldwell, where he's kind of, hey, break glass in case of emergency? Or are you bringing in a guy that's going to compete for QB1? Now, the thing with those guys is, as we know, you go.
And we're talking about 2027,
right?
2026, just to be clear.
Right. Yeah. You go for a starting caliber guy in the portal, you know what it's going to cost you up front from a rev share standpoint. So I would think, Bobby, to say it's a really big spring for KJ Lacey is an understatement, because for Sark, you've got to make that decision pretty early to make sure you've got your ducks in order. That way, if you do feel like you need to go after a starting quarterback in the portal, you got to make sure, hey, from a rev share standpoint and NIL standpoint, you're ready to go get in the fight, because those guys are few and far between, and the ones that are good enough to start for you, you know what they're going to cost. So the time is now for KJ Lacey to start proving whether or not he can be the guy in 2027.
All right, that's going to do it. Special edition of On Texas Football. Congratulations to Ty Knutson out of Smithson Valley there in Central Texas. He is committed to the Longhorns, becomes commitment number 6 in the 2027 recruiting class. For Jeff Howe, as well as our producer, Matt Hutchison, got one final thing to say. Ty, look 'em horns, buddy.